Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Outdated Wrestling Hour. We got a very special guest this time. It's Scottie Richardson, the author of the famous book about pro wrestling. It's called Family, Bacon, and Rasslin. Gosh, I love bacon. I can eat bacon all the time. But you know what my favorite use of bacon is? Bean with bacon soup. Bob, get the can ready. Please? It's the Outdated Wrestling Hour. My name is Bob Smith. You might remember me from my days with Pro Wrestling Illustrated Magazine. And I want to welcome you back to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Podcasting is a strange thing in that this show isn't really time dated. It's not timely. We don't do wrestling results a whole lot. We may refer to something that happened recently in certain big cards and things like that. But basically, it's the type of show you can binge and not feel like it's out of date most of the time. However, I had a recent spate of interviews in a very short time, like 5 shows I recorded within, I'd have to say a week, literally 7 or 8 days. And as I record this, I have a radio interview I have to record 2 days from now. So, as the show gains in popularity, I'm becoming more and more busy with it. So how do you budget your time? Well, I have a tendency to, right after recording an interview with someone, finish the show all at once. Just do it all, edit it all, get it all in the can before we ship it out for final sweetening, as they say. And as you know, I'm a sound stickler, and I want it to sound as good as I can. That created a problem in that by the time you hear the show, this is old news, but we had a really bad week in August into the last week of August. And it's the 800-pound gorilla in the podcast, and I have to mention these things. It's really late to talk about it, but we had a spate of deaths. One completely unexpected. It's just so sad, and it tears fans young and old school, new school, serious fans and casual fans alike. I mean, this was major news across the world. So that being said, I just want to give the condolences to 4 families, about 4 very talented people. We will miss Terry Funk, Bray Wyatt, Abe Jacobs, and Rich Landrum. I mean, I would shut my computer off, turn it on, and I'd see another name. I'd shut it off, see another name. It was really, really tough period for a lot of different people. And I feel really bad for the friends that I know who are very, very shaken up by this news. And rightfully so. I wish all the survivors the very, very best. And that's what I'll say about that. I don't want to overstay my welcome and state too much. Out of the 4 of them, I knew Terry Funk the best. But who didn't? All of us in wrestling had our opportunities with Terry, and what a major talent we have lost. So in any event, here's to all 4 of them. God bless you all. All right, now that I got that off my chest, it's time to get into a fun show. As you folks know, one of my favorite things in wrestling on the internet is Wrestler Weekly. You can find it all over the internet world. And we've already had on 2 different occasions, Mike Leotis has been on the show. And he's just been booked to do a 3rd one. But finally, we got Scottie Richardson on the blower here. And Scottie is the author of the new wrestling classic from 2018, Family, Bacon, and Rasslin. And, wow, I've been meaning to talk to this gentleman for a long time, and we finally got our schedules to jibe. And he has some exciting news. He's working on another book. Yep, another book. Another book, Bob. Yeah, another book. All right. You know why? Because the books are you know what the books are? The wrestling world of books right now is what the old wrestling magazine used to be. Photos you've never seen before, stories you've never heard before. This has been a golden age for books right now. And I'm really excited to learn about this. And we're going to talk about a whole mess of old school wrestling stuff too. So enough of my yak. And here's one of the most interesting personalities in the entire wrestling world. And quite an accomplished person in athletics as well. It's the one and only from Wrestler Weekly, Scottie Richardson. I'm really happy today because we have the second half or the second person from Wrestler Weekly here. Mike Leotis was on the show a couple of times in the past, and they were great shows. And Wrestler Weekly, for you people who may not have seen it or anybody who's not familiar with it, is on both Facebook and Twitter, and they post stuff. Wrestling belts, old magazines, memories, clips. I loved it long before I started either of the podcasts I've been on. I've been watching this stuff ever since they started it. And I don't know who contacted who, but I think I responded to something once. And one of them wrote me back and said, "Are you the Bob Smith that's..." I said, "Yeah, that's me." So a friendship started with Mike. And then I got in touch with Scottie over his now classic 2018 book called Family Bacon Rasslin, which I said, and I still say, is the best wrestling book ever written by a non-wrestler regarding fandom, regarding being a fan. It really catches the essence of why you love wrestling, old school wrestling. So from North Carolina, I am very proud to introduce on this show for the first time, Scottie Richardson. Thanks for being here. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks, Bob, for having me. And just a big fan of the outdated podcast. Big fan of yours, of course. And it's funny, Bob, because a lot of people my age as kids, back in the 70s and 80s, as we grew up, my idols ended up being yourself, Bill Apter, Craig Peters, and you guys were as much a part of my childhood because I saw your names. And I was so curious. I love this article. Who wrote it? Bob Smith. So thanks, Bob.
And thinking the way wrestling fans thought, you probably thought that was a fake name, right? I got that a lot. It can't be real Bob Smith. Who would put that in a magazine? I'm like, well, I did. That's my name. Well, aren't you like, Matt Brock or Liz Hunter? No, I'm Bob Smith. I really am. I was a real sports writer before I joined the staff there. I actually worked with Mike Tyson, and I was an NBA writer. I was in the NBA Writers Association and or Pro Basketball Writers, I should say. And I covered some baseball, but it was for a small newspaper in upstate New York. 2 years after I had that little stint, I was with PWI. I'm like, how lucky can a guy get? I mean, come on. Yeah. It didn't hurt that I won a journalism award with Mike, on an article, an interview with him. What better fodder can you bring a wrestling and boxing magazine company than something like that? And you hand that across the desk and you figure, I'm 50% in, I better know how to write now,
That's right.
So I asked Mike about this, and I think you're really the originator of Wrestling Weekly. This was your idea, right?
Correct. How'd
you come up with it? Why are you doing it? Or is it just for fun? Or you're looking, what's the end goal for you guys with this thing?
I'll tell you, Bob, I get asked that question often because people see my shirt and they think it's part of an old school territory or whatever. And, but I tell you, I've got a marketing degree, and I've been in athletics for now 29 years this year. In 2016, I was in my office, and I've been a big wrestling fan since birth. And I said, I really love wrestling. And so I'm going to start as a marketing experiment on Twitter, and I'm going to do the Wrestler of the Week and just see what happens on Wednesdays. I chose middle of the week, Wednesday, and I had our hashtag WW whatever Wrestler of the Week. And I started catching on, a lot of followers. So I said, you know what? That's the current product. I'm going to do the Throwback Thursday Wrestler of the Week because I'm more old school classic wrestling. And I was doing this on my personal Twitter account, which is a lot of basketball and scouts and college coaches, and because of my profession. And I was picking up so many followers, Bob, that I said, I really got to move this off of my personal Twitter because, posting Kevin Sullivan with the face painted with the devil outfit on Thursdays is probably not winning me any friends in the basketball world. So let me see if I can move this to another platform. So, I just sat in my office and I tried to figure out. I was Googling and searching, and so I came up with Wrestler Weekly. Thought it was a good idea, so I did a bunch of searches and nobody had it. So I bought the domain and did what went to GoDaddy and started Wrestler Weekly, and it just started taking off. And from there, met Mike Leotis. Mike, actually, I started the Wrestler Weekly VIP, and Mike was I might have been the first VIP member, and that's how we started talking. And one thing led to another, and a year later, I asked Mike to join us and join the team with my brother Reggie, and kind of rest is history. Hard to believe. 7-year anniversary coming up in a couple months.
That's amazing. And also, I'm sure that a lot of people got to know you through the book.
Right.
Again, I'll say it came out in 2018. It's Family Bacon Rasslin. It is such a heartfelt look back at being a kid, what you had to go through just to watch wrestling on TV, to go to the arenas and really get serious about it. It reminded me of my growing up, and I think that's why I like it so much. Everybody has their formative years, and it's usually through the TV when it comes to pro wrestling. And this is just, I'm not alone. I read other people's reviews for this book, and the right people said the right things about it, and I went out and got it, and I was like, holy smokes, this really is good. So if you haven't read it, you should check that out. So it's a nice piece of work, Scottie. It really is.
Thank you so much. That means a lot coming from you, Bob. Appreciate that.
Well, I know it's not easy to write. Even a so-called professional writer like me, I've had my share of writer's blocks, and I was talking to Brian Solomon. I can't write a book. I've tried it 1,000 times. I sit down and I go, duh. I am a hack, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I write 5 graphs of really clean copy with great headlines and good captions. That's what I've done my whole life. And, everybody has their strength. I just don't know if I could do a long form book, especially not fiction. I couldn't do a fiction book. So how hard was it for you? Did you have a literary background at all? Did you write for school paper or anything like that? Or how did you decide to say, I'm going to write a book?
Well, it's funny because my second book was actually supposed to be the first book. And so, and we can get into that a little later, but my original idea was to talk about my discovery of Superstar Billy Graham versus Harley Race and the Super Bowl of Wrestling 1978. And I found that through my love of the magazines. Growing up, we were, my dad was in Christian education. And so that meant he had a 9-month contract, didn't get paid in the summers. My mom, no college education, growing up in Southwest Virginia. And for us, wrestling was a family deal. And so much so that the title of the book basically means on Saturday mornings, when you smelled the bacon, it was time to get up, because that meant wrestling is coming on, and the whole family, I'm talking grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, they're all coming to my house because my mom was such a good cook and, gravy, biscuits, bacon, eggs, you name it. But when you smelled the bacon Saturday morning, that was your alarm clock, and it was a family deal. And we did not have cable. We had the rabbit ears, and, it was Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, Bob Caudle, David Crockett. And then if you were lucky enough, 11:30 at night, right after the local news, Worldwide Wrestling, I should say, is Rich Landrum and Johnny Weaver were the hosting then. And so it became such a something that was a part of us, as that fiber. And so when I originally had the idea to write Belt versus Belt, which is my second book, I'd given kind of the manuscript to my editor, and the editor said, you actually got 2 books here, Scottie. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, let's do this. He said, the journey part of discovering really should be the first book. And then, you write about your fandom, and he said, it's probably not going to sell much, but when you write the second book, then people are going to enjoy your writing and they'll go back and discover the first one. And so obviously I had to come up with a name. And so Family Bacon Rasslin really fit, because that took me right back to that childhood memory and in those memories. And so it was really, the first 6 chapters were kind of how the first book started. And so it's just kind of a strange thing there.
I don't want to give away anything that's in the book, but explain why you kind of got banned from watching wrestling, because I have a similar story in my life, and it has to do with good versus bad. So
Sure.
why don't you start, and I'll hit you with mine, because it's so similar. I think you'll get a kick out of it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So my dad worked for Pepsi early mid 70s, and had a religious experience, and we left Marion, Virginia, which is kind of near Bristol, Virginia, Tennessee, Southwest, and moved to Lynchburg, Virginia. And my dad went back to college, went back to school at Liberty Baptist College back then. So Jerry Falwell, for those that know that. Mm-hmm. And so we were there from 79 to 81. And summer of 81, we moved to Jacksonville, Florida, because my dad graduated from college and became a history teacher, basketball coach in Jacksonville, Florida. And so we went from Bob Caudle and David Crockett to Gordon Soley. So as a wrestling kid, I'd read about Gordon Soley and Championship Wrestling from Florida in the magazine. So my brother, I have a younger brother, 3.5 years younger, and we were excited to move to Jacksonville. And although, Scott McGee and Mike Rotunda were not, we're certainly not Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat going from Mid-Atlantic to Championship Wrestling from Florida, but it was all great until Kevin Sullivan, and I've told Kevin this on numerous occasions, the devil Satan worshiper gimmick banned us. And my dad, between that and the bloody covers of, the Sheik on magazines, my dad decided that too much blood, too much devil. And so my brother and I came home from school one day. All of our wrestling magazines were gone. All of our posters, programs, ticket stubs, missing. And for many, many decades, we thought my dad had just thrown them away. But when I was writing the book, my mom said, he actually didn't throw them away. He burned them in the backyard. And I said, well, great. That'll make for a better copy of my book. And so that was the deal. And for 3 years, we were not allowed to watch it. Although it really, our creative juices were flowing, Bob, because we took Star Wars men and G.I. Joes and created territories. For me, Jimmy Snuka was Boba Fett. Ric Flair was a stormtrooper. And for so many years, people said, why wouldn't Ric Flair be Luke Skywalker? I said, no, Luke Skywalker was Ricky Steamboat because he was the good guy. And the stormtrooper, I guess, with the white, and Ric Flair with the white hair, and the white helmet of the stormtrooper. But Black Jack Mulligan was Darth Vader, and so on and so on. And so we were, we booked our own matches, Bob, so through the Star Wars men. But that was, and then in Ric Flair, I owe it to Ric Flair because his visit at a Rose's department store in the summer of '87 is how we got back into wrestling. And my dad decided, it's been a while, and my dad was a big wrestling fan. You got to remember back then, and so he went through that stretch. But my dad's favorite wrestler was Blackjack Mulligan and Ox Baker. He loved those guys, and my mom loved Ken Patera. So, I think my dad saw that there was some things there that he probably could have done differently, and so it was a great reunion at a Rose's department store.
Well, okay. Now, let me start with one thing, and then we'll go into my similar story about wrestling and, religion. Okay.
Yeah.
First off, I just want to go back to you with Kevin Sullivan. Kevin Sullivan was mad at either my magazine company or Apter because I think they used the word the devil or Satan in a headline. Sullivan swore up and down. He never mentioned Satan. He never mentioned the devil.
Right.
He was doing a cult as opposed to a satanic thing in his mind.
Right.
Of course, they were so doggone close. I mean, if you were to look at it from afar, you go, here comes some Satan worship, because that's what Satan worshipers in your mind's eye would look like.
Right.
Don't you agree? I mean, it's just, and he would talk about eating the cosmic cookie and the tree of woe and all these other whack stuff. And Mark Lewin looked demonic. So I can see why people thought it was satanic. There's no question about that. Now, as far as my similar thing to what you had, this was a little different, but it's the same thing. Pro wrestling in the Albany, New York area where I'm from showed on WRGB Channel 6, 11 a.m. on Sunday mornings. You know what else was 11 a.m. on Sunday morning? Church.
Absolutely.
My parents were Baptists.
Yeah.
You're going to church with us. I'm like, yeah, can I watch wrestling? You're going to church with us. So this went on for a couple of years till I was probably maybe 15. Finally, I said, but something inside of me said, you got to watch this wrestling, dude. You got to watch wrestling. When I get a vibe about something, I'm usually right later on. So I was about 15 and a half, 16, and finally they let me stay home once. And then it became what we did. I stayed home and the rest of the family went and watched. But do you know, if I hadn't watched that wrestling when I was a kid, I don't think I ever would have been a wrestling writer or had the knowledge base. But what inside me told me I had to see this. Not I want to see it. I had to see it. Something just told me that it would be part of my future. I didn't know that, but it worked out that way. I ended up working for like GC London and about 3 other magazine companies. So I had to see those shows. Everybody needs a knowledge base to start with. And you wouldn't believe what I remember from those years. I mean, it's like the stuff really made an impression on me. People say that the East Coast wrestling was different than what you guys had where you lived. And it was. Right. Everybody had their own flavor.
Right.
Some people thought that the wrestling on the East was less action-packed than what you watched. And you know what? It really was. But it was the style. It's like every federation, every organization had its own style. Looking back on those years, what was your favorite organization? If you had to choose one, what would you want to watch?
Oh, I'm Mid-Atlantic all the way. I mean, I am.
I can understand that. Yeah,
I'm a diehard Mid-Atlantic, and Flair and Steamboat. I've been able to meet them many times at this point, and it just, there's just something about. I was talking to Mike the other night about this, and I can put on an 8mm Mid-Atlantic DVD, and I don't even have to turn the sound on. I can just watch, and I don't even have to watch the action in the ring. It was the fans. There was something electric about being in, whether it's Greensboro Coliseum or Charlotte Coliseum or in Richmond. There was just something there that you could look at the first 2 or 3 rows with no sound, Bob, and it's almost like poetry. You could see. Or like the opera, you could see when, someone was, as they talk now, selling. And Bob, I'm so kayfabe. I don't watch shoot interviews. I told Mike the other night, I'm so old school that I was the guy yelling that Ronnie Garvin's man with a hands of stone punch was illegal. So that was illegal punch. And so,
it was.
Yes, yeah. It was. So, but I said, but when you do turn the sound up on those old Mid-Atlantics, everyone talks about Steamboat and Flair and '89 and the trilogy. I'm telling you right now, I can pop in a 1979 and it blows the 89 away. Just the way that they fed so much off those crowds. And you'd have you can imagine the ladies with the canes, they're yelling and throwing stuff in the ring. I mean, it was when you hear about Ole Anderson being stabbed and all that stuff walking to the ring. I mean, it was so real that and uh, it's one of those things where it's hard to describe. I did on my show, Bio Wrestler Weekly Presents, I did a 1 hour Broadway just talking about Flair and Steamboat, the rivalry. And most of it, 45 minutes of it, Bob, was not even really specific matches. It was just the way that they could tell the story to where it was so believable. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm waxing poetic here, Bob, but Mid-Atlantic is really a part of my fiber at this point. And so I love them all. Wrestler Weekly, we cover them all, but my home territory is Mid-Atlantic.
Well, I will say this, thanks to the miracle of old videotape, everybody's wrestling life now can consist of all the different territories because it's out there. And I will say Mid-Atlantic, in my mind's eye, was probably, if it wasn't the hardest hitting, it was close. And it was easily the most realistic in terms of the way they set up feuds, the conduct of the wrestlers. It wasn't corny. WWF, all the tag teams were salt and pepper shakers, I call them. Moondogs, Samoans, executioners. It was always two of a kind. The Japanese guys. It was just like there was always a match set. It wasn't that way in Mid-Atlantic. Mid-Atlantic, they started feuds that could last 6 months, and you understood why they were fighting each other. I'll tell you that much.
Well, I tell you, every year I try to do a New Year's resolution of wrestling, and this year I decided to go in my library DVD vault, and I watched WWF videos. So whether it was individual wrestlers, Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold, Macho Man, and I was going through everybody in the WWF, and my goal was to get through my whole library. And I tell you what, Bob, and again, I love it all, but after about a month of this year, January, I called Mike and I'm like, Mike, I just can't do it anymore, man. I can't. It's I feel like I'm drifting like as a purist, and I'm a wrestling fan purist. I'm losing myself because I just want to see an armbar for 5 minutes. I'm that guy. And so, look, there's a time and place for pomp and circumstance, but my roots are Ole and Gene Anderson working a body part until their opponent actually gives up, like doesn't get pinned, doesn't submit by a wrestling hold as like a finisher, but actually can't lift his arm and quits. that's the matches that I grew up on. And Paul Jones and Ricky Steamboat and Greg Valentine and Baron Von Raschke, and to me that's just pure wrestling.
Well, there's a huge difference between 70s WWF and 80s WWF. Huge.
Huge.
They changed it, they softened it, they sweetened it, they made it more colorful, bigger, faster, whatever you want to call it, more colorful. I prefer the 70s like crazy. I mean, it was just, it had a gritty feel to it. Sometimes they were they did their TV in like agricultural halls and stuff. I mean, it was like, it had more of a traditional wrestling feel to it. It's when they started to expand that I think things changed pretty rapidly. It became more showbiz.
Well, and it could be my athletic background. If I feel like if I'm not smelling the popcorn, then I'm just not involved. And so, as a coach, I mean, when I watch some of those old, whether it's WWF or even AWA, or, I've got to be able to smell the popcorn through the TV. And maybe I need to see the fan throwing the popcorn. Maybe that's what it is. But I feel like that's just, kind of that old school. I mean, I guess, my first wrestling matches were not in an arena. The first match I ever went to was on a high school football field. And I was watching Big John Studd and Ken Patera were the Mid-Atlantic Tag Champs. And so, Dino Bravo, and, the first wrestler I got an autograph from was Johnny Weaver. And he rubbed my hair. I had hair back then, Bob. And so he said, "Here you go, Tiger." And the only thing that I remember that I just didn't know why he did that, but Johnny Weaver signed his autograph. I love that. I even told his daughter years later that story, but he signed his autograph over Jimmy Snuka's face. So I think he did that on purpose, but that was the times. And so, football fields and high school gyms and armories, and, that was my upbringing.
Me too. The big shows I saw were in an armory that held 4,500 people. It's a big armory.
Right.
But in Albany, New York, oh, God, I love those shows. And talk about the changing times. Back then, they had one big honking light over the ring, and that was it. That was the whole show. No pyro, no music, no nothing. Wrestlers would walk the aisles, and they would get heat. I remember Baron Cicluna once almost started a riot in 75, just sneering at people. He just stood in the aisleway with his arms crossed with his cape, sneering, and the place went bat. Went batty. He was like, "Boo! You think you're better than us?" And they were pelting him with stuff. And I understand at a subsequent card, he had his car vandalized.
Wow!
So just did it by sneering because he didn't talk that much. You never know. You just never know. And the Albany fans were serious good guy fans. I mean, they bought into it, boy. I mean, I'm sure there was the same way when you were a kid. If you were amongst serious wrestling fans, they really wanted their favorites to win all the time.
Oh yeah, I mean, Ox Baker was one of those guys that my dad loved because he knew it scared us kids. And so he would walk around the house, and he would come up to you and act like he's going to give you the old heart punch. And so that was, my cousin Tony Richardson ended up becoming a wrestler in the independent promotions in the AIWF in West Virginia and Tennessee area. And he attributed his becoming a wrestler his name was TR Superstar after my dad and the heart punch that he would give my cousin. So that was, but that's the beauty of it, to be able to, my mom still loves Ken Patera to this day. So, those are the things you just don't, you don't forget. And then, when you lose that, you love something as much as we did, and then you lose it. As I told you off the air, Bob, I'll tell our listeners here, my wife really hates the fact that I lost those years in wrestling, because now my man cave is littered with wrestling memorabilia that I felt like I needed to go out and get, that I missed out. I missed out on those days. But that's the beauty of it. And then being able to share it with all of our followers and friends that with Wrestler Weekly, that's the beauty of it. Quick story, Bob, not to get off topic, but just so our listeners understand, there's a lot of people that kind of do what we do, and they post things and they talk about wrestling, or they post their items that they have. But, what it's become for us is my father, who really loved Wrestler Weekly. He loved taking photos with belts and then us posting them. He got a kick out of that. And he passed away a couple years ago, and I'm at the viewing before the funeral, and I look, and I'm just kind of looking to see who's coming and going, and you know how it is there, kind of a funeral situation. I look on the very back row, and I see a familiar face, but I was asking my brother Reggie, I'm like, who is that? That looks familiar. And we got to looking, and it was one of our Wrestler Weekly followers who actually lived in Jacksonville, Bobby Norton. Shout out to Bobby. He came to my dad's funeral. I mean, that's a special thing, and I think that's what we do at Wrestler Weekly. We try to create that family feel, and it's all about passion. We don't post anything that's not sentimental or we're passionate about. Not to say
Mm-hmm.
that people that do what we do, we're not saying we're better than anybody at all. We're very humble in this because of the people we have met. When I go to Fan Fest, I mean, it's a family reunion more so than actually meeting the actual wrestlers. And so it's really
Right.
taken on something that's larger. And I don't want to get off topic there, Bob, but I wanted to mention that.
No, you made a great point because people talk about this podcast. A lot of people that I didn't expect to listen to it do listen to it. And the nice part about it is there are other podcasters that like this show, I think, the best out of everybody. So there's no competition between us. I've been on like 5 different other podcasts now. They've been on my show all the time. There's no competition. This is community.
Correct.
Because we all feel the same way. We're all looking backwards instead of, now you got WWE versus AEW. This is better. And the kids don't like the old school and the old people don't like the new school and blah, blah, blah. I ain't got time for that. I am just here to have fun and look back at the stuff that we really enjoyed when we were younger. Because it's like there was nothing like it. It was like larger than life. It was, I think, John McCall of his podcast, the Rasslin Talk with Mayor McCall, he said it best. He said, these were our superheroes turned to life, come to life. And, I didn't consider them superheroes. I thought they were such big friggin' guys. I mean, it was like, I remember sitting in the armory looking up at Superstar Graham and going, I can't believe how big these guys are and how in shape they are and how just plain large they were. They all, even with the one light hanging over that ring, they looked magical. I mean, there's just something about it. Just enough showmanship, just enough color, just enough drama, just enough violence, really. I think inherently we kind of like to see a fight. Wrestling fans like to see a good fight. Right. So it had everything I was looking for. I liked it better than movies or TV. And that's why I'm still looking at old school videotape all the time, because it's like when I see something I never saw before, I just pop because it's like, wow, this is great. It's like I don't get that feeling when I watch Raw anymore. So it's like, what can I tell you? But to emphasize what you're saying, it's a community. We're not competing. I think you feel that same way. There's probably other people that do what you do online.
Sure.
You say, bring it on. Not hey, you're cutting into my territory. Can you bother me? It's a whole different mindset.
Yeah. And I think that, I don't get into the AEW and all that. I love it. I watch it. But for me, I just, a couple years ago, I got really big into Los Angeles wrestling from the 70s and really did a deep dive, and Greg Valentine in 74, 75, that era, and kind of just learning it through the magazines. Went back and read a lot of the magazine stuff and tried to get as much video as I could. And but that's what's important to us, is to be able to preserve history. We try to do that. We try to talk about what happened in the 70s and the 80s and historical things, whether it be matches or title changes that may have happened, and or, as I'm working on now, as belt versus belt, the most historic match of our time. Because I think that, when you're talking about 2 world champions on a Wednesday night in the Orange Bowl, 1978, I don't think a lot of people know really what all happened. So we're going to try to preserve it.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Tell our fans about it,
So expand on that a little bit about, this is your next book, or it was originally, from what you just said, it was your original book, but now it's your new book that you're working so hard on. And how's it going? I got a kind of peek at it, fans. I'll be honest with you, and I'm telling you, this is another one worth waiting for, because This is subject matter I don't think anybody's touched on. It's like when Brian Solomon wrote his book about the Sheik. This is very similar in that people will go, "Hey, what's this all about?" So I think you're onto something here. I really do.
Well, I think that era, I just love 1977, 78. If I could go back in time, and people say that, but what I've actually done, Bob, is I have created a time capsule here in the Wrestler Weekly headquarters, the man cave here. I'm actually going through Happy Days right now, the series, but I try to make sure that I can, when my day is done and I retire here for a few hours, I think that's what it's about. And belt versus belt. When I was a kid, everything was in the wrestling magazines. We had Mid Atlantic Championship Wrestling in the morning on Saturdays, but other than that, we didn't have cable. This was before the internet. I don't think that many people that are, let's say, 10 years younger and more understand really when they hear that. Well, we didn't have the internet, didn't have this, but our information was really by word of mouth. And if you couldn't go to the matches, if I had a relative that was in New York, first question I'm asking is, "Hey, you go to any wrestling? Can you tell me what happened?" Because the magazines were, as when you would receive a magazine, it was 90 days old. You were getting the information, at a later date, and then so
But
for us,
I'll interject here. When I
yeah,
was working for London Publishing, PWI, Inside Wrestling, all that stuff, it was 6 weeks.
right.
By the time we sent that thing out and the time it hit the newsstand, it was 5 to 6 weeks. Angles would have changed, people left territories and stuff. So it was always a battle for us to make the stuff seem fresh. And we couldn't be psychic. And the few times we tried to be psychic, we ended up with egg on our face. So, you had to be really, really careful what you wrote about. So you couldn't be too headliney because, unless you're a coverage, let's say, of a big event or a big card, you couldn't even talk about the blow off of a feud because you don't know if it happened or not. So it was very hard to walk that tightrope. Sorry to interject, but
yeah, no problem.
Yeah, it was 6 weeks. We always called it the 6-week curse.
Yeah, and so for us, we didn't have a lot of magazines. Whatever was on the newsstand, late 70s, but the back issues and a magnifying glass, the back issue ads and a magnifying glass is really how we started to try to piece the puzzle together, and it's like a treasure hunt. And I tell this to people, and I'm trying to paint this great picture for you, but it's black and white, small capsules. The magnifying glass would blow that capsule up so you could really see what was on the cover of the magazine. And when we started seeing Superstar Billy Graham on covers, you talk about being a superhero. You got to remember, this was the era of Lou Ferrigno and Incredible Hulk. And, Friday nights we had Dukes of Hazzard and Incredible Hulk. And that was, Incredible Hulk was this big giant figure, and so was Superstar Billy Graham. And then Harley Race was a guy that every once in a while he was mentioned in Mid Atlantic Championship Wrestling. Maybe you got to see a match where it was like tape delayed, and all of a sudden it's like these two titans, and they're on the cover of a magazine, and they're just posing. And my brother and I were like, "Man, I wonder if they wrestled. You think they wrestled?" And then it's like, "Oh man, we got it so magnified. We had the big magnifying glass that it said I think Bill Apter wrote the caption, the most important match, I think is how Bill wrote that title. And I've changed it to the most historic looking back at it. But it's like, man, these are the two big, and really in comparison, you'd look at like Rock and Hogan or whatever, the two big champions with the belts, and the belts were so important on the cover. That's always been my big pet peeve, Bob. I say this for every wrestling fan: put a champion with the belt on the cover, and I'm telling you, it will sell out. But those two champions, and then just being able to learn and to know they actually did wrestle. they had a match, and not only did they have a match, they had a best 2 out of 3. So you got more bang for your buck. It was an hour match. And so everyone can go to YouTube right now and they can see what happened. And so there's no surprise there. But what my book is about is really the focus of the buildup. So I want the reader to do what we would do for like boxing or UFC now, where there's that year-long buildup. I remember when Mike Tyson had those matches, and when he was getting ready to take on Michael Spinks,
Right.
that buildup was tremendous. In the interviews, and you've got a champion, and you got this young, hungry lion, and that's really how I'm taking it's a kayfabe look at it, Bob. It's an old school approach, and I hope the reader enjoys it. But it's that year long, and so every chapter is a month in 1977, and I'm going to build the reader all the way through until the classic match, Orange Bowl, in January of '78, Super Bowl of wrestling. So I hope the readers will enjoy it.
I know they will. I know they will. It's like, boy, we're in a golden era of good wrestling books right now. Your work, Brian Solomon. I just had Joyce Postian on the show, who did the picture book about the AWA. That thing is mint.
Yeah.
You know what it reminded me of? And I think you'd agree with this. It was full of pictures I never saw before. So it reminded me of going to the newsstand when I was 15 to buy a wrestling magazine, because you saw the stars you never saw before.
Right.
That was the beauty of the wrestling magazines. You could see somebody from the Mid-Atlantic or California or Memphis or Canada. It was the only place you could see those stars back in those days, right?
Yeah. Whenever I saw Nick Bockwinkel on a cover, I just couldn't wait to read it, because that AWA was just so foreign. You're talking, we had no family in the Midwest. We were so disconnected in small town Virginia that to see Mad Dog Vachon and Pat Patterson and those guys. I mean, it just I don't know that my son's 12 and he goes a lot of the fan fest with me, and I tell you, my daughter's 3. Her name is Piper. And she loves Charlotte Flair. And Charlotte Flair actually retweeted or whatever, it's reposted now. I don't know the X now, Twitter and X. I don't know the jargon here, Bob. But Charlotte liked one of Piper's posts. And so Piper goes to school every morning, and she's got Charlotte Flair figure in one hand and Rhea Ripley in the other. So So it's a family thing here.
Wow. It's a family thing, passing it down. And, I don't want to go on record as saying all the new stuff is bad, because it's not. I like Rhea Ripley. I think the women's division is great in WWE. I like it better than the men at this point.
Right.
You know why? Because the women fight the way the men used to fight. I'm better than you, and I want that belt. But that's all you need.
I agree.
That's the way I've always felt about it anyway.
I agree. Yeah, so the belt versus belt, and actually, Bob, belt versus belt, volume 2 is we'll follow this one, and that will be spotlighting a lot of those. Anytime it's Harley Race versus Bob Backlund in Madison Square Garden, or Nick Bockwinkel versus Bob Backlund in Toronto. So that's the sequel. So we got a lot of things in the works here.
Oh, you heard it here first, folks. This is great. I didn't even know that. Wow. Hey, keep writing. Seriously.
Thank you.
Seriously. We need more. You've gone from personal memories to wrestling history, and I think it's a nice right turn you're taking on us. I think this is, as you know, I'm real excited about the next one. So number 3 is probably going to be even better. So, I'm a fan. What can I tell you? I went out and bought the T-shirt, fans. I'm such a Wrestle Weekly fan. I have a Wrestle Weekly T-shirt that I proudly wear to my bowling league. And I have people ask me, what does that mean? And then I explain it to them. And I know for a fact that one of my fellow keglers went out and bought your book based on my recommendation.
Awesome. Yeah. That's great.
I think he ordered it from Amazon or something like that. And it's like, because you would not believe that I bowled to stay in shape, and I bowled my whole life, and I just don't want to quit. It's fun. and you wouldn't believe the amount of bowlers that love wrestling. It's like bacon and eggs. They just go together. So, in fact, my local bowling alley put a poster up about my podcast when it first got on the air.
What?
And that's how I developed a local following. And if I look at when you do a podcast, the host sends you the cities that listen. And New Hyde Park, New York is like my second biggest because everybody knows me as a bowler there, like a tournament bowler. And they're all listening to the podcast. So I said, hey, if this gets listeners, I'm wearing a shirt. You know?
Perfect.
So thank you for helping make me famous, dude. That helps.
That's awesome.
Well, anyway,
thank you, Bob.
We have had Mike on the show twice, and now you're on the show, and you two are the only people that I have said this about. You have an open invite to come here anytime you want, because it's like, I really, really enjoy what you guys do. It's always a lift in my shoe. Every time I look at X or Twitter, whatever it is, and I see somebody put the ratings from 1981 or something, I'm like, oh boy, I'm still a kid. It reminds me of going to the newsstand at 15 and looking, what did you open first when you bought a wrestling man? Did you go to the ratings first like I did? Or
my favorite was Inside Wrestling because it was a longer view. And
right.
The Inside Wrestling inside, I could see everyone's faces, the top 5 faces in, top tag teams, most hated, most popular. I mean, that was it. And so we do that every Friday. We do the Friday ratings. Every day we do a theme. And so there's the plug for Fridays, but Friday ratings is, but that was the first one. And, the thing that we wanted to see, Bob, is when they showcased the world champions, we just were hoping that they had belts. So if the little photo,
right.
if you could see Bob Backlund's world title around his waist, or Harley Race with over his shoulder, that was the beauty of it.
Mm-hmm. Hey, let's take a little step back. Wrestle Weekly. Tell everybody, every facet of it, where they can see it, how they get involved. The floor is yours. Hype it, because I want people to go to Wrestle Weekly. So tell them all about it right now.
Yeah. So every day we do a theme. They can go to anywhere: X, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We're on TikTok now, Bob. We're even Threads were there. So YouTube at Wrestler Weekly, and every day is a theme. Sunday we actually do shout outs. So if you interact with us, we'll give you a little shout out on Sundays.
I have to look. Yes.
Yeah. Mondays we do the Monday Mag memorabilia. It's always those covers that really jumped off the page. And Tuesday we have discussions. Today, as we're recording here, Bob, but every Tuesday, right now we're getting our viewers to give us the GOATs. That's a big term now in sports, the GOAT. Bob, I'm so old school, Bob, that my dad, GOAT meant you really were bad. Like if my dad said, "Oh, he's a GOAT," that means he was terrible. So, but that's like the buzzword now in sports, the GOAT. So we're going through the GOATs of territories, and this week I think we're talking about Portland wrestling. And Mike's a big Portland fan. He loves Buddy Rose and his feuds up there with Piper and those guys. But Wednesday we do the champions. We do a champion WWE champs, Wrestle Weekly champs, and then Thursdays we're going throwback. We'll do some classic stars on Thursdays, the ratings on Friday, and then Saturday's the big day. That's the big showcase where we showcase something big in our collection. And this last time we did the feud with Kerry Von Erich winning the title from Ric Flair. So it's fun. It's interactive. We hope that you do interact with us and tell us your favorites, because that's how we get to know each other.
Awesome. Folks, I got to tell you this. There's a lot of wrestling stuff on the worldwide interwebs. Wrestler Weekly is my favorite thing. I told Mike this a lot. It's my absolute favorite thing. It's short, digestible, fun, and you bring back a lot of stuff that I forgot and had some memories of that you rekindle. It's awesome. So if you guys are listening to this show to listen to, for nostalgia, Wrestler Weekly is the place. And the price is right. You have no excuse not to go look at it. So I want everybody listening to go discover Wrestler Weekly because there's nothing else like it. And you're going to have a blast. I guarantee it. I absolutely get the Outdated Wrestling Hour guarantee of satisfaction.
And I'll say this, Bob, if you are a music fan, especially of a rock and roll variety, one of the things that I've done recently, Bob, is I started R&R Weekly. I've got my own rock radio show now, Bob. So
really,
I'll have to send you the link.
Yeah, do that. Yeah.
So every Wednesday night, we have a live show on nextdoorradio.com. Give them a plug. And so I'm all over the place, Bob. I'm coaching basketball. I'm athletic director of a school.
That I knew.
I've got 2 kids.
I knew that too. Yeah.
Wife. We're all over the place. So.
Yeah. At my advanced age, I have never been this busy. Not even close. I'm still working in sports media and all this other stuff. And what Dave Dynasty would call a shoot job. I love that expression.
Yes.
That's the one that pays them, And it's like I did the other podcast. Now I'm doing this podcast, and it's like this week alone I did 4 interviews. You're number 4, and it's
wow.
It's Tuesday. I don't mean this week, like the last 4 days in succession. I've done interview, and that means editing and all this other stuff. So, but you know what? I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it. So I'm not complaining. I'm a lucky cat because after all these years, I'm still doing what I like. So, and that's the big thing. Do what you love, right?
Oh yeah. Well, anything that if you don't have passion, I don't know. I can't really help you. I mean, people tell me all the time, Bob, if they're talking to me, they know that if it's a topic, music, sports, wrestling, I'm going to ooze passion. So that was a compliment somebody gave me, and I guess I'll take it.
That's a good one. Yeah. No, it's true. Follow your passions. You only get one life. And what I like about you is not only are you enjoying yourself, but through your work in sports, I think you're helping a lot of people too. So congratulations on all that. It must be very satisfying work for you.
Well, the key there, I've been coaching basketball and athletic director of schools for now my 29th year has just begun 2 weeks ago. We just started school back. And I tell parents, I say, look, I don't want to coach your son for 2 years or 3 years. I want to coach them for life. 10 years from now, when they're 27 or 28, that's real coaching, because that's when you get those calls of, hey, coach, my wife just had a baby, or hey, coach, my mom just died. That's real coaching. And when I hire coaches, I tell them, I say, look, if you don't feel comfortable coaching them 10 years from now, you really can't coach for me right now, because the way we do things is we do try to bridge that gap and build that relationship, because as has been said many times, a coach can influence a person more than in a year than the average person does in a lifetime. And we really believe that. And we see that every day, with kids that come to our school or to come to play basketball for me. And, we've had success. We've produced 74 college players. So kids keep transferring in because they hope that opportunity for them to play at the next level will be there. And, I tell them it's not easy. They got to put in the work, and they have to understand what the definition of work ethic means. And we'll do the rest. But it's been exciting. God's blessed me, no doubt about it. And to be here and to know if I could tell that young kid that is reading PWI that we would be here in 2023, I'd have to really put that in an envelope, seal it, and hope it comes true. And so, Bob, I appreciate everything that you've done for us, Wrestler Weekly, and me personally. It means a lot. I'm humbled and honored, certainly. And so I can't thank you enough.
Hey, pleasure's all mine. Like I always say about myself, people say, "Oh, you did this, you did that." You know what? I'm a glorified fan. If I wouldn't be doing this stuff if I didn't have deep-rooted, like you say, passion for it. So we're having fun. That's the best thing. So I want to thank
Absolutely.
once again Mr. Scottie Richardson. It's been a long time coming. We're glad to get you on the show. And pretty soon I want to get you and Mr. Leotis on at the same time, and we can have a little fun. How's that sound?
That'd be great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Folks, it's Scottie Richardson. In the meantime, go out and get that book, Family Bacon Rasslin. You'll really enjoy it, and look forward to his next 2 books. And big future here. Looking forward to reading them, my friend. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir.
See, I told you that was going to be a fun one. Love those guys. I love Wrestler Weekly. Seek them out all over the web. I can't tell you what a lift in my shoe those guys are, not only because they're cool guys, but what they put out almost virtually every day. It's incredible. And I want to bring on more people just like them who are on Facebook, putting out match results, showing great old school pictures, all that stuff. It means a lot. It's keeping the spirit of old time professional wrestling alive, and that's what I like. And we got to do it for you, the listeners, in case you might not know about these things. There's a lot of great stuff that you can seek out on the web, and it looks like old school wrestling matches on videotape are burgeoning as well with new streaming video opportunities to see some great old stuff. We're going to do our trivia contest. We have 3 great contestants. We're about ready to pick a date, and we're going to tape the doggone thing. I hope this is going to be as much fun, as funny, and as entertaining shows we've ever done. We got 3 tremendous people coming on, just tremendous people. And I really hope you enjoy it. And I want to thank you all for the response to both the Rod Bland and Jared Hawkins shows. They both did really well, and Jared was great, wasn't he? We got to get him back here. He's a great podcaster in his own right as well, and he's doing great. And Rod Bland, I'm telling you, try to find his music. Just say Rod Bland in your Echo, your Amazon Echo. Hey, Alexa, play Rod Bland. I'm telling you, it's worth it. Great grooving stuff, man. Good R&B and blues. Can't beat it with a stick. So anyway, we're going to wrap this sucker up and do our usual good nights here. On Facebook, I'm Robert Smith, if you want to find me. If you want to write to us, it's outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. Twitter, which I rarely go on, it's Bob Smith NYC. But a really cool place that you should go to learn about the Outdated Wrestling Hour fan club, a nominal way for you to get involved with the show, help support us, and take part in face-to-face over the interwebs Zoom meetings that we're going to schedule. And we're going to do that hopefully on a monthly basis. And I want to talk to you face-to-face. Any questions you want to ask? Maybe we'll get some guests on to join me. We're going to do our best to entertain you. And there's some other perks about the Outdated Wrestling Hour fan club as well. I want to make it worth your, whatever you contribute. I want to make it so worth it for you that you want to stick around for a while. So that's the Outdated Wrestling Hour fan club. And you can find it at outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com, where you can also find every single one of our programs. Click on them. You can binge like crazy. Like I say, a portion of our audience is what I call app phobic. They just want to go online and click a button. I'm with you guys. I mean it. There's 80 gazillion podcast apps out there. I'm not complaining about that, but it can be daunting choosing which one you like or finding a show. So if you have trouble finding us, the Outdated Wrestling Hour, go to outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. And also, I want to thank Buzzsprout right now. If it wasn't for Buzzsprout, we wouldn't have had half the success we've had. What they've done for the show is phenomenal. Check them out if you're starting a podcast. It's just plain buzzsprout.com. I would go nowhere else. I will go nowhere else. There's a slew of broadcasting hosts out there. They have done wonders for this show every single time. It's miraculous, the work they've done for us. I'm telling you, it's fabulous. The few times I've had to contact them over something, they've jumped to it. They're fantastic. There's a link on our show notes if you want to find out more about it. If you're interested in starting your own podcast, I would wholeheartedly endorse Buzzsprout. I don't usually say things like this, but you know what? Recently we had a little snafu and they took care of it handsomely. They're just great. They're just great. So in any event, this is Bob Smith, the proprietor of the Outdated Wrestling Hour. And we insist that you come back here week after week. We're out every Friday. I'm a little bit remiss in saying that. Fridays, we get our release date. Now, I've noticed it on a couple of the smaller apps that are out there for podcasts. It doesn't arrive on Friday. Maybe it's on Saturday, but it's released to all the podcast networks on Friday, and all the big ones will have it. We're on Spotify. We're on the X Stitcher. You name it. I mean, all of them. Really, all of them. I can't think of any we're not on. Podbay and Podbean, and just go down the list. Anything you can think of, we're there. So that's it for now. My name's Bob Smith, the old wrestling magazine writer and editor. Thank you again, Scottie Richardson, and thank you for listening to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. We'll see you next Friday, if you know what's good for you. And in the meantime, take care of yourself, will you?